What if Qui-Gon Jinn survived? What if he was the one to train Anakin instead of Obi-Wan? How would that have changed the fate of the Jedi, Anakin, and the entire galaxy? Today we're diving deep into this alternate Star Wars reality. Stay tuned until the end, because the twists in this timeline are something you won't want to miss. Without further ado, let's get into it. The battle on Naboo raged like a storm in the depths of the reactor chamber. Qui-Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi fought side by side against the Sith Lord, Darth Maul, whose crimson lightsaber slashed through the air with deadly precision. The rhythm of the fight, the clashing of lightsabers, echoed with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. Qui-Gon moved with the practiced grace of a Jedi Master, his emerald blade deflecting Maul's brutal strikes. But there was an urgency in his every movement. A sense of the unseen future tugged at his heart, the fate of the boy, Anakin Skywalker, his newfound apprentice. Maul fought with the ferocity of the dark side, his face a mask of fury. The red blades danced dangerously close to both Jedi, who fought not just to survive, but to protect one another. In a flash of movement, Maul's foot lashed out, catching Obi-Wan off guard. The young Jedi stumbled back, and before he could recover, Maul's saber sliced through the air, slashing across Obi-Wan's chest and sending him crashing into the wall with a gasp of pain. Time seemed to freeze for Qui-Gon as he saw his apprentice fall. The sight of Obi-Wan's injury ignited something deep within him, something primal. In an instant, all the wisdom and serenity he had cultivated as a Jedi evaporated, leaving only raw emotion. It wasn't anger, it was protection. It was love. The same love he felt for Anakin, the boy he had promised to train, the boy he had promised to protect. With a roar that seemed to come from the very core of his being, Qui-Gon's strikes became faster, more precise, his green blade flashing in rapid arcs. He pushed Maul back, his connection to the living force fueling his movements. Maul, caught off guard by the sudden intensity, faltered. Qui-Gon saw the opening he needed. With one final, powerful strike, he severed Maul's double-bladed saber and kicked the Sith Lord back, sending him plummeting into the pit below. Breathing heavily, Qui-Gon deactivated his lightsaber and rushed to Obi-Wan's side. The young Jedi lay crumpled against the wall. His chest burned from Maul's strike, but he was alive. Qui-Gon knelt beside him, his hand hovering over the wound as he called on the Force to ease Obi-Wan's pain. "You're going to be all right, Obi-Wan," Qui-Gon whispered, his voice shaking slightly. He wasn't just speaking as a Jedi Master to his apprentice. He was speaking as a father to a son. He had saved Obi-Wan, just as he would save Anakin from the darkness he sensed on the horizon. In the towering halls of the Jedi Temple, the soft glow of the setting sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows over the members of the Jedi Council. Qui-Gon stood before them, resolute but weary. He had made his case before, and he would make it again, even if it meant challenging the entire council. Anakin Skywalker, the boy he had met on Tatooine, was the chosen one. He had felt it in the very core of his being. But the council, cautious and bound by their dogma, refused to see it. Mace Windu's voice cut through the air, firm and uncompromising. "The boy's future is clouded, Qui-Gon. His connection to his mother, his attachments, they will lead him down a dangerous path." Qui-Gon's gaze hardened. "He is more than his attachments. He is the chosen one. I will train him." The council members exchanged glances, unease rippling through the room. Yoda sat silent, his wise eyes studying Qui-Gon. He could sense the determination in the Jedi Master's heart, the fire that had ignited ever since he had saved Obi-Wan's life. Qui-Gon was not one to be swayed by the council's hesitation. His faith in the living force was unwavering, and in this, he saw something the others did not. "I cannot abandon him," Qui-Gon continued, his voice softer now, but no less firm. "The boy needs guidance. He needs to understand his power. If we leave him to wander through life without that, the consequences could be catastrophic." The room fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Qui-Gon was not blind to the risks. He knew Anakin's path would be difficult, but he believed, no, he knew, that with the right guidance, the boy could fulfill his destiny. "Very well," Yoda finally said. his voice carrying the wisdom of centuries. But tread carefully, Qui-Gon. The boy's future remains unclear. Qui-Gon bowed slightly, his heart heavy but determined. He had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Years passed, and Anakin grew under Qui-Gon's steady hand. The Jedi Master had become more than a teacher to the boy. He was the father Anakin had never had. Unlike the other Jedi, Qui-Gon did not push Anakin to suppress his emotions or sever his attachments. He understood that Anakin's strength came from his connections, not in spite of them. It was a delicate balance, but Qui-Gon believed in nurturing, not controlling. He didn't fear Anakin's emotions. He respected them. As they sparred in one of the temple's training rooms, the sound of lightsabers clashing echoed through the air. Anakin was fast, his reflexes honed by years of training, but there was always something more to his movements, an edge that set him apart from the other Jedi. It was his passion, the fire that drove him forward, and Qui-Gon knew how to channel that fire. "Feel the Force around you, Anakin," Qui-Gon instructed, deflecting one of Anakin's strikes with ease. "But don't let it control you. It is a part of you, as much as your heart or your mind." Anakin's blade swung down in a quick arc, but Qui-Gon sidestepped, tapping the boy's wrist with his own saber, disarming him. Anakin stumbled back, breathing hard, frustration flashing in his eyes. He wanted so badly to prove himself, to be worthy of the Jedi's trust, but Qui-Gon saw more in him than just power. "You're trying too hard," Qui-Gon said, his voice gentle. "You don't need to prove anything to me, Anakin. I already believe in you." Anakin's shoulders relaxed slightly, and for a moment, the tension that always seemed to hang over him like a shadow dissipated. Qui-Gon's words were more than just advice. They were the validation Anakin had always craved. In Qui-Gon he found not just a master, but a father figure who understood him, who trusted him. The two stood in silence for a moment, the hum of their deactivated sabers the only sound in the room. It was in these quiet moments that Anakin felt truly at peace, a peace he had never known before coming to the Jedi, but peace, Qui-Gon knew, was fragile. The sands of Tatooine were unforgiving. The twin suns beat down mercilessly on the barren landscape as Anakin raced through the desert, his heart pounding in his chest. Shmi Skywalker, his mother, was in danger. He had felt it in his dreams, visions that haunted him, pulling him back to the planet he had once called home. When he reached the Tusken Raider camp, it was already too late. He found his mother bruised and broken, tied to a post in one of the tents. Her life was slipping away, and all Anakin could do was watch as the light in her eyes dimmed. "Mom, I'm here," he whispered, cradling her in his arms. Shmi smiled weakly, her hand brushing against the cheek. "Anakin, my son." And then she was gone. A scream tore from Anakin's throat, a cry of pure, unbridled agony. The pain, the loss. It was too much. He stood, his blood boiling, his vision clouded with rage. The Tusken Raiders who had taken his mother's life, they would pay. All of them. With a roar, Anakin ignited his lightsaber and charged into the camp. His blade sliced through the air, cutting down every raider in his path. He didn't think, didn't feel. There was only anger, only vengeance. His mother's death had ignited a fire in him, one that threatened to consume everything in its path. But then, in the midst of his fury, he saw them, a Tusken mother and her child, huddled together in fear. The woman shielded her child with her body, trembling as Anakin approached. He raised his saber, ready to strike them down as he had the others. But something stopped him. In that moment, the memory of Qui-Gon's teachings flooded his mind. The living force, compassion, balance. Anakin stood frozen, his lightsaber inches away from the woman's face. He could see the terror in her eyes, and for the first time since his mother's death, he felt something other than rage. He felt sorrow. Lowering his lightsaber, Anakin stepped back. His chest heaved with the weight of his emotions, but he couldn't bring himself to kill them. The rage ebbed away, leaving only a hollow emptiness in its wake. He turned and walked away from the camp, his heart heavy with grief. His mother was gone, and no amount of vengeance could bring her back. But as he left the Tuskens behind, he knew that he had made a choice that Qui-Gon would have been proud of. The battle in the cavernous hall of the Invisible Hand was reaching its peak. The ship's control center shook from the intense bombardment of the space battle outside, but within, the real war was unfolding, one of light and darkness, of past and future. Count Dooku, Sith Lord and former Jedi, stood with cold precision, his curved lightsaber gleaming crimson. Across from him were two Jedi, each embodying the promise of the future, Anakin Skywalker and Qui-Gon Jinn. Anakin's lightsaber burned blue in his hands, its hum echoing in the confined space. His heart beat like a drum in his chest, but his mind was calm, grounded, thanks to the years of Qui-Gon's teachings. Still, the shadow of his mother's death and the weight of his power lingered, always just beneath the surface, waiting for a crack in his control. Qui-Gon, with his green blade steady, stepped forward. He faced his former master, Count Dooku, who had fallen to the dark side, but there was no hesitation in his stance. Qui-Gon knew what was at stake, and he knew the man Dooku had once been, and the dark path he had chosen. "The dark side has consumed you, Dooku," Qui-Gon said, his voice calm but firm. "It's not too late to turn back." Dooku smiled, but it was a hollow, mirthless thing. "You always were the idealist, Qui-Gon, but you are wrong. The galaxy needs control, order, and under my master's vision, it will have it." Anakin surged forward first, his blade meeting Dooku's with a flash of blue and red. The Sith Lord parried easily, his movements refined, almost graceful. But Anakin was relentless, each strike faster and stronger than the last. Dooku could sense the raw power in the young Jedi, the barely contained rage simmering beneath the surface. "Good, Skywalker," Dooku sneered, blocking another furious strike. "Let your anger guide you." But as Dooku spoke, he felt the shift. Anakin's strikes became more controlled, his movements precise, guided not by rage but by the calm that Qui-Gon had instilled in him. Anakin didn't rise to the bait. Qui-Gon, joining the fray, moved with deliberate precision, his lightsaber weaving through the air like an extension of the Force itself. He struck with purpose, his every movement aimed not to defeat Dooku through sheer power, but to outthink him, outmaneuver him. The two Jedi fought as one, a father guiding his son. Dooku, though powerful, was overwhelmed. The ferocity of Anakin, tempered by Qui-Gon's wisdom, created an unstoppable force. Blow by blow, the Sith Lord was pushed back. He had underestimated them both. Anakin, his breath heavy but controlled, disarmed Dooku with a final, sweeping strike, sending the Sith Lord's lightsaber clattering to the floor. Dooku dropped to his knees, breathing heavily, but his eyes were still cold, calculating. He knew what came next. Palpatine's voice cut through the silence, a serpent's whisper in the ear of the Chosen One. "Kill him, Anakin. He's too dangerous to be left alive." The words hung in the air, the weight of the moment pressing down on Anakin like a crushing wave. He stared at Dooku, hatred flickering in his heart. This man who had caused so much pain, who had helped orchestrate the war that had torn the galaxy apart, his mother's death, the chaos of the Clone Wars, all of it, part of Dooku's legacy. His fingers tightened around his lightsaber, but then Qui-Gon's voice broke through the storm in his mind. "Anakin, no, this isn't the way." Anakin's eyes flickered to his master, and for a moment the darkness receded. Qui-Gon's steady gaze met his, full of trust, full of belief in him. "This isn't justice," Qui-Gon said softly. "This is revenge. You're better than this." The words sank deep into Anakin's soul. The choice was his. For a moment, the rage that had been building inside him subsided, replaced by the clarity Qui-Gon had taught him to seek. Anakin lowered his lightsaber. Count Dooku, bound by Jedi guards, was taken into custody, his capture a blow to the dark side. But as Qui-Gon and Anakin walked away, the shadow of Palpatine lingered. The Sith Lord's eyes gleamed with a dangerous new understanding. Anakin wasn't his. Not yet. The days following Count Dooku's capture were a blur for Anakin. The Chancellor, always present, always watching, began planting seeds of doubt in Anakin's mind. Palpatine had once been a mentor to him, a man of power and knowledge who had offered Anakin a place of security in a chaotic galaxy. Now, though, Palpatine's true nature was starting to seep through, but it was subtle, like the whispering wind before a storm. Palpatine's visits to Anakin became more frequent. In his private chambers within the Senate building, Palpatine would speak of the Jedi, of their failures. His voice was smooth, his words calculated. "They don't understand you, Anakin," Palpatine said one night, his voice soft yet insidious. "They never have. Even now, they doubt your abilities, your potential. The Jedi are too rigid, too blinded by their code to see the true path to power." Anakin stood, staring out over the cityscape of Coruscant, the glow of the city below him reflecting the turmoil within. He could feel it, the rising conflict between the Jedi and the Senate, the mistrust that lingered in the air. And yet, through it all, Qui-Gon's voice remained like a beacon of light in the darkness, a reminder of who he truly was. Still, the doubts lingered. "The Jedi preach control, restraint," Palpatine continued, his voice slithering into Anakin's mind. "But what if it's your attachments, your emotions, that give you true strength? What if the power to save the ones you love lies not in the teachings of the Jedi?" Anakin's heart clenched at the mention of love, of loss. Padme, the dreams that had haunted him, the visions of her dying in childbirth, they still plagued him. He had told Qui-Gon about the dreams, and Qui-Gon had guided him with wisdom and calm. But even Qui-Gon couldn't stop the future. He couldn't save Padme. "Tell me, Anakin," Palpatine pressed, stepping closer, his eyes gleaming with dark promises. "Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?" Anakin turned, his brow furrowed. "No." Palpatine's voice grew quieter, drawing Anakin in with every word. Darth Plagueis was a Sith Lord so powerful he could even keep the ones he cared about from dying. The words cut through Anakin like a blade. He stared at Palpatine, his mind reeling. Could it be true? Could there really be a way to stop the death that haunted his dreams? Could he save Padme? He could save others from death, but not himself, Palpatine continued, his voice laced with venom. "The Jedi won't teach you this power. They can't. But I can, Anakin. I can show you the path to save the ones you love." Anakin's hands trembled at his sides. He was torn between two worlds, the world of the Jedi, of Qui-Gon's teachings, and the world that Palpatine was offering him, a world where death had no power over him. But was it worth the cost? Anakin's steps were heavy as he walked the quiet halls of the Jedi Temple. The weight of Palpatine's words pressed on his chest, suffocating him, the promises of power, of control over death. It was everything he had feared and longed for. But somewhere deep within him, there was still light. There was still hope. He found Qui-Gon in the meditation chamber, the gentle hum of the Force surrounding him like a soft breeze. Qui-Gon opened his eyes as Anakin approached, sensing the turmoil in his apprentice's heart. "Anakin," Qui-Gon said, his voice calm and warm, "sit with me." Anakin hesitated, but finally sank to the floor beside his master. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears and doubts. Finally, Anakin broke the silence. "Master, what if the dreams I'm having? What if they're a warning? What if I can stop them from coming true?" Qui-Gon's eyes softened. He had known this conversation would come sooner or later. "The future is always in motion, Anakin, but trying to control the future, trying to force it into what we want it to be, that is the path to the dark side." "But what if I can save her?" Anakin's voice cracked, the desperation evident. "What if I can save Padme from dying?" Qui-Gon remained silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. He knew how much Anakin loved Padme, and he had never asked him to give up that attachment, but now it was becoming a danger, and Qui-Gon had to guide Anakin carefully. "Anakin," Qui-Gon began softly, "sometimes the very act of trying to prevent a vision is what causes it to come true. In our attempts to change fate, we create the very path we fear." Anakin's gaze fell to the floor. His heart ached, torn between his love for Padme and the fear of losing her. But deep down, he knew Qui-Gon was right. Trying to control the future, trying to bend it to his will, that would lead him down a dark path. "I don't know what to do," Anakin whispered, his voice barely audible. Qui-Gon placed a hand on Anakin's shoulder, his touch reassuring. "Trust in the Force, Anakin. Trust in yourself. You don't need to walk this path alone." For weeks, a growing sense of unease had settled over Anakin. The words of Palpatine, always soothing, always tempting, gnawed at the edges of his mind. The Chancellor had often spoken of power, of the Jedi's limitations, and of Anakin's potential to transcend those limits. But now, something had changed. There was a growing suspicion, a darkness Anakin could no longer ignore. Palpatine had often hinted at powers beyond the Jedi's reach, powers to save the ones he loved. The tragedy of Darth Plagueis still echoed in Anakin's thoughts, but it was a nagging conversation with Qui-Gon Jinn that planted the final seed of doubt. Qui-Gon had taught him that sometimes the very act of trying to prevent a vision is what causes it to come true. Could Palpatine have been twisting the truth all along? The visions of Padme's death continued to haunt him, but Qui-Gon had been helping him see the danger in trying to control the future. Anakin's trust in Qui-Gon had kept him grounded, but his meetings with Palpatine kept pulling him in the other direction, leaving him in turmoil. The tipping point came during one of Anakin's routine visits to Palpatine's office. The Chancellor, as he often did, praised Anakin's skills, feeding his ego, but something was off. Palpatine seemed more impatient, more desperate. He kept pushing the idea of absolute power, of taking control of one's own destiny. "You're more powerful than you realize, Anakin," Palpatine said, his voice as smooth as silk, though Anakin sensed an underlying urgency. "The Jedi, they are holding you back, but I can teach you things no Jedi can." Anakin's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about? What things?" Palpatine leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The power to save Padme. The power to stop death." At that, Anakin's heart clenched. Palpatine had never been so direct before. He had always been subtle, speaking in veiled terms, but this was different. This was a promise. One that Palpatine knew Anakin couldn't resist. "How do you know about Padme?" Anakin demanded, his voice rising with a mixture of fear and suspicion. A dangerous glint flashed in Palpatine's eyes. "I know everything, Anakin. I've watched over you for years. I know the torment you face, the dreams that haunt you. The Jedi would never help you. They fear your power. But I can give you what you desire." Anakin stood, his pulse racing, his mind reeling. There was something deeply wrong here, something he hadn't seen before. How could Palpatine know about his dreams, about Padme? How long had he been watching? And then it struck him. "You," Anakin began, his voice barely a whisper, "you've been the one manipulating all of this, haven't you?" Palpatine's smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating expression. "I've done what is necessary, Anakin. The Jedi have been deceiving you. They are plotting to take control of the Republic." Anakin took a step back, his hand twitching toward his lightsaber. Palpatine's words were like poison, twisting the truth. But now, the pieces began to fall into place. The Clone Wars, the Separatists, the political maneuvering. It had all been orchestrated not by the Jedi, but by Palpatine. The truth hit Anakin like a blast from a turret cannon. "You're the Sith Lord," Anakin breathed, his voice shaking with disbelief. "You're Darth Sidious." Palpatine's expression turned cold, but there was no fear in his eyes, only calculation. "Yes," he said, his voice dripping with power. I am the Sith Lord, but I am also the only one who can save Padme. The choice is yours, Anakin. Join me, and together we can end this war. We can bring peace to the galaxy. And Padme, she doesn't have to die." Anakin's hand was trembling now. Every fiber of his being was screaming at him to draw his lightsaber, to strike Palpatine down where he stood. But the thought of Padme, her life slipping away, held him back. But this time, there was a difference. Qui-Gon's teachings. Qui-Gon had shown him that trying to control the future, trying to manipulate fate, was dangerous. He had warned Anakin that the dark path only led to destruction, not salvation. Anakin took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I won't join you," Anakin said, his voice firm despite the turmoil in his heart. "I'll stop you." Palpatine's eyes narrowed. "Foolish boy, if you won't join me, then you will fall." Anakin turned and bolted from the office, his mind racing. He knew what he had to do. Palpatine had to be stopped, and only the Jedi could do it. Anakin raced to the Jedi Temple, his heart pounding with urgency. The moment he entered the Grand Halls, he sought out Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. The two Jedi were in the meditation chambers, their connection to the Force steady and calm. "Master Qui-Gon," Anakin gasped, breathless from both his run and the weight of his revelation. "It's Palpatine. He's the Sith Lord we've been looking for. He's Darth Sidious." Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan exchanged shocked glances, but neither doubted Anakin's words. Qui-Gon could sense the truth in Anakin's voice, the desperation that came from finally uncovering the terrible secret. "We have to act quickly," Qui-Gon said, rising from his seat. "If Palpatine is the Sith Lord, he's been behind this war from the start." Obi-Wan's face was a mask of concern. "What about the Council? They'll need to know immediately." "We don't have time," Qui-Gon replied. "Palpatine could make his move at any moment. We'll deal with the Council after we stop him." Jedi had already sent Mace Windu on a mission to Utapau. With General Grievous still at large and leading the Separatist army, the Jedi had deemed him the greatest immediate threat. As the senior member of the Council, Windu had volunteered to go in person, knowing his combat prowess would ensure Grievous's defeat. Night had fallen over Coruscant. The Chancellor stood alone, gazing out over the city. He knew the Jedi would come for him soon. He had planned for this. The door slid open, and in stepped Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Anakin. They were calm, focused. Sidious turned slowly to face them, his dark eyes gleaming with malice. "So, it has come to this," Sidious hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "I had hoped Anakin would see reason, but it seems you Jedi have corrupted him." "You've twisted this galaxy long enough," Qui-Gon said, stepping forward. His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable sadness in his eyes. "It ends here." Sidious's smile was chilling. "On the contrary, Master Qui-Gon, it's only just beginning." With a flick of his wrist, Sidious ignited his crimson lightsaber. The sharp hiss of the blade cut through the air, and in a flash, the battle began. Obi-Wan lunged forward first, his blue blade meeting Sidious's red in a flurry of sparks. Anakin followed close behind, his attacks powerful but controlled. Every strike guided by the calm center Qui-Gon had taught him to maintain. Qui-Gon moved with the grace of a true master, his green blade cutting through the air with precision, his every strike aimed not to kill, but to disarm and end the madness. But Darth Sidious was no ordinary foe. His movements were impossibly fast, his strikes brutal and precise. He fought with the full might of the dark side, his power surging through him like a storm. The office became a blur of lightsabers, the hum of the blades punctuated by the sound of clashes and the occasional grunt of effort from the combatants. The battle moved swiftly across the room, with Sidious leaping and twisting through the air, his blade striking out at all angles. He fought with ferocity, his attacks aimed to kill. Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and Anakin moved as one, their bond unshakable. But Sidious was relentless, and soon the tide of the battle began to shift in his favor. Despite their skill, despite their numbers, Darth Sidious was simply too powerful. He began to push them back, his attacks coming faster and harder. The dark side pulsed through him like a flood, his red blade moving in a blur. "You're weak," Sidious snarled, his face twisted in a sneer as he locked sabers with Anakin. Anakin gritted his teeth, pushing back against the Dark Lord with all his strength. Sidious attacked with relentless fury, each blow stronger than the last. His red lightsaber cut through the air with precision, his yellow eyes gleaming with glee. But he needed to thin the herd. He could not defeat all three at once. With a sudden burst of power, Sidious unleashed a blast of Force lightning aimed directly at Obi-Wan. The lightning struck Obi-Wan before he could react. His body convulsed as the dark energy coursed through him, sending him flying backward into the far wall. He crumpled to the floor, his lightsaber slipping from his hand as he lay unconscious, the faint scent of burning fabric lingering in the air. "Obi-Wan!" Anakin cried out, his focus momentarily broken. But Sidious didn't stop. Seizing the opportunity, the Sith Lord turned on Anakin, thrusting his hand forward and sending another surge of lightning into the young Jedi. The electricity crackled through Anakin's body, and though he fought to resist it, the pain was overwhelming. His lightsaber dropped from his hand as he fell to his knees, struggling against the unrelenting torrent of dark energy. Anakin's scream echoed through the chamber, the agony evident in his voice. Seeing his two companions incapacitated, Qui-Gon Jinn knew it was up to him. He had no time to think, no time to plan. His instincts took over as he stepped between Sidious and Anakin, raising his lightsaber to protect the fallen Jedi. But Sidious, now facing only one opponent, was more than ready. The moment the lightning ceased, Sidious lunged. His red blade flashed toward Qui-Gon with terrifying speed, and the Jedi Master barely managed to deflect the first blow. The force of the strike sent a jolt up Qui-Gon's arm, and he realized in that instant just how strong Sidious truly was. He wasn't fighting just to defend himself, he was fighting to kill. Each strike was aimed at Qui-Gon's heart, at his throat, at his vital points. Qui-Gon's defenses began to falter. Despite his connection to the living force, despite his years of training, Qui-Gon found himself overwhelmed. Sidious was faster, stronger, and every strike pushed him further and further back. The room seemed to shrink around them. As the battle raged on, and Qui-Gon could feel his strength beginning to fade, Sidious grinned, sensing the moment of weakness. With a sudden, final strike, the Sith Lord's red blade cut through the air in a deadly arc. Qui-Gon, moving just a fraction too late, tried to block the attack, but Sidious was too fast. The red lightsaber plunged into Qui-Gon's chest, piercing his heart. The Jedi Master gasped, his body seizing as the lethal blow struck him. His lightsaber slipped from his grasp, clattering to the floor with a hollow sound. Slowly, he crumpled to the ground. Anakin struggled to his feet, the pain from the lightning still coursing through his limbs. His eyes widened in horror as he saw Qui-Gon Jinn fall to the ground, his once vibrant presence in the Force flickering out like a dying flame. "No!" Anakin cried, his voice filled with anguish, but there was no time to mourn. Darth Sidious stood over Qui-Gon's lifeless body, his red lightsaber still ignited, his face twisted into a cruel smile. Anakin reached for his own weapon, but he was too slow, too weakened from the lightning. Sidious, however, did not strike again. His yellow eyes flicked toward the shattered window, and for the first time during the battle, there was a flicker of calculation, even wariness, in his expression. The Force rippled through the air. Other Jedi were approaching. Sidious had already won the battle, but he knew better than to face reinforcements. He was powerful, but even a Sith Lord couldn't stand against a group of Jedi Masters alone. The ship hovering outside the window hummed with energy, its pilot, a silent, brooding Darth Maul, ready to whisk his master away. Sidious muttered, his voice dripping with dark intent. "The Jedi may think they have won, but the galaxy will fall." With a final, menacing glance at the fallen Jedi, Sidious deactivated his lightsaber and leapt toward the broken window. The sound of his cloak whipping in the wind was drowned out by the roar of the ship's engines as it hovered closer. Darth Maul, who had been watching from the cockpit, locked eyes with Obi-Wan for a brief, chilling moment before turning back to the controls. The ship shot off into the night, disappearing into the sea of Coruscant's glowing cityscape. By the time the approaching Jedi Masters arrived, led by Master Shaak Ti and Plo Koon, Palpatine was already gone, his plan to eliminate the Jedi only delayed. The Masters rushed into the devastated office, their faces reflecting the grim realization of what had transpired. "Too late, we are," Plo Koon said softly, his gaze falling on Qui-Gon Jinn lying motionless on the floor. Anakin knelt by his fallen master, his heart heavy with grief and guilt. The man who had believed in him, who had guided him through his most difficult moments, was gone. Anakin clenched his fists, his mind swirling with thoughts of vengeance, of the power he had been promised. But the memory of Qui-Gon's teachings, of his belief in the living force, held him back from slipping into the darkness. Obi-Wan, now on his feet, stood beside Anakin. His face was pale, his eyes filled with sorrow. He had lost a mentor, a man he had looked up to for so many years. The weight of the loss settled over the two Jedi like a suffocating cloak, but they knew they could not stop now. The Sith were still out there, and the battle was far from over. Mace Windu returned from his mission on Utapau, having defeated General Grievous and brought an end to the Separatist army. But his victory felt hollow, overshadowed by the grim news of Qui-Gon's death and the escape of Darth Sidious. "There's more," Windu said, his deep voice carrying the severity of the situation. He stepped forward, glancing at the fallen Qui-Gon before addressing the gathered Jedi. "I received word just before I arrived. Count Dooku has escaped from prison." As the Jedi gathered to prepare for the battles ahead, the shadow of the Sith loomed larger than ever. Darth Sidious, Darth Maul, and now Count Dooku, three powerful enemies united by their hatred of the Jedi, hidden in the darkness, plotting their next move. The light side had lost a great master, but with Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Mace Windu standing together, hope remained. The Jedi would fight on, but they knew the true battle was only just beginning. And there you have it, an alternate Star Wars timeline where Qui-Gon Jinn's survival changed everything. Would this have prevented Anakin's fall to the dark side? Or would fate have taken a different path entirely? Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more Star Wars what-ifs and theories. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.